period and free agency starting, that, if Griffen would have done that, his value might not have been as high as if you would have tried to force the issue, had them release him, and he goes out into the free agent market and he can compete with some of the top defensive ends out there. But, there's Ziggy Ansah still out there unsigned. And so there are other defensive ends that are in a 4-3 system that haven't really gotten that lucrative money. So he may have figured, look, this is my best chance to keep earning, a really good living in the NFL and stay at a fairly high number. But one of the interesting things about it is, in order for the Vikings to be able to sign Barr to that contract, they needed Griffen to restructure. Well, both of them are represented by the same agent and agency. And so it was kind of a fine line that they had to walk. But, both Griffen and Barr were actually in the Vikings facility yesterday at the same time, talked to each other. Vikings had a short video on it. And, I think it kind of does speak to the camaraderie, especially on defense, that a lot of these guys have and the respect that they have for each other.
Well, if that pays off for him, great. It is interesting to see. And, I just hope Everson is healthy and feels well and is able to get through a season, under these circumstances. Tell me about Shamar Stephen coming back.
Yeah, I mean, this was it's interesting there. We talked about the Jets-Vikings connection. The Vikings-Seattle connection has been going on for a long time, too. And, so last year, Tom Johnson, Shamar Stephen initially signed with Seattle. Sheldon Richardson, who had been playing in Seattle, signs with the Vikings. And now, all of a sudden, it comes back where Richardson leaves the Vikings. Tom Johnson ends up back at the Vikings after 1 week last year in Seattle. And now Shamar Stephen signed a 1-year deal out in Seattle. Now he's back with the Vikings, kind of filling what Richardson had done. The difference is Shamar Stephen is a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger of a guy. He's kind of one of these tweener guys between a nose tackle and a 3 technique. So I don't think you're going to get the same explosive pass rushing element that Richardson gave the Vikings last year, or even Sharif Floyd previously when he was healthy. But the one thing that I found really interesting that Mike Zimmer said yesterday was that with Shamar, the way that he plays, it's a little bit better for stopping the run, and therefore it could alter some schemes and packages that Zimmer has, as opposed to having more of a traditional 3 technique guy. So I don't know exactly what to read into that, except maybe it frees up Eric Kendricks to do a little more blitzing, because they talked about how much teams scheme to be able to protect in case Anthony Barr blitzes, and that they've had to use other guys to blitz. Well, Kendricks hasn't really been one of those guys as much as it was, Harrison Smith or Mackenzie Alexander out of the nickel position. So it'll be interesting to see exactly what that means. But another takeaway I had from yesterday is, okay, Shamar Stephen can come in. He can play the 3 technique. I think ultimately he's a guy that's best used as a rotational guy between the 3 and the nose. And with as deep as this draft is for defensive linemen, I'm not going to be shocked at all if in the first 2 rounds, maybe 3 rounds, the Vikings end up taking a defensive tackle that gives them more of a long-term solution at that 3 technique.
Of course, it feels like they need to draft like 8 offensive linemen at this point.
Yes, it does. They are very low on offensive linemen. So, if we want to get into that, there were a lot of offensive linemen that went off the board early. Saffold is the guy, Roger Saffold, that everyone kind of had targeted, oh, the Vikings should get him. He's really the top guard that was out there. Well, he signed for about $11 million per year with Tennessee. And so I went back and I looked at a lot of these free agent deals with guards and centers, some of the top guys that were out there. And, every one of them, well, any one of them, I should say, could have been signed for what the Vikings used to sign Anthony Barr if the deal would have been structured similarly. Despite Barr averaging 13.5 in this contract, only 5.6 million counts against this year's salary cap. So they had to do some finagling there. And I haven't yet looked at the future years of the Viking salary cap situation, but it does seem like they're starting to try to kick the can down the road a couple more years on a lot of these contracts. And eventually they're going to have to make some decisions there. But, right now, Nick Easton is still out there, and I think he's a guy that definitely fits what they want to do with the new offense under Kevin Stefanski with a lot of Gary Kubiak influence. And after that, not really sure what else is out there. So I agree with you. They do need to invest in the offensive line in the draft.
Let's get into some of the other decisions the Vikings made. Do want to thank Tony Hoaglund, Hoaglund, your State Farm agent, works out of Champlin, can handle financial services, and you don't need to live in or near Champlin to use his services. Michael Russa and I live downtown, and we both work with Tony.
Hey, Minnesota sports fans. This is your local State Farm agent, Tony Hoaglund. I need you all to ask yourselves this question. If you're in an at-fault car accident and you are sued for $700,000, how much of that $700,000 will my current insurance company pay? If you are unsure or can't answer all $700,000, you need to give us a call. State Farm has been number one in car insurance since World War II and number one in homeowners insurance since 1964. For a no-obligation review of your current policies, call us at 763-421-4900 or check out our website at www.champlininsurance.com.
So Andrew Zendeo is gone, and I think that was the right decision. I just think that he's not the right kind of guy to pay a lot of money to, whether it's because of intent to injure, the fact that he might injure a teammate at any point, the threat of or the reality of personal fouls. I just think it was time to move on.
Well, and I agree with you on those points, but I also think it was okay. He was scheduled to make $5.5 million. His coverage ability is not what Anthony Harris's coverage ability is, in my opinion. And they could get Harris for about $3 million on his restricted free agent deals. So, with as tight as the Vikings are up against the cap, every million here and there matters to them. And I just think Harris has a higher ceiling. I think he can get there very soon. In fact, I would argue I think he was probably a better safety last year than Zendeo had been for them. And I think it gives them the ability to have Harrison Smith play down in the box more and realize that Anthony Harris can cover more ground in the back end. So that was a deal that I definitely think made sense and a natural decision for them to make. Cutting Mike Remmers before they really had a backup plan at guard was a little surprising. I think Remmers certainly is more of a right tackle than he is a guard. But that saves them about $3.2 million as well. So all of that figures into it. Remmers actually went out and had a visit with the New York Giants and Pat Shurmur. So we'll see if that develops into an offer or a contract at this point, or if there's another option out there for him. But with a guy like Remmers or Tom Compton, to me, these are all sort of backup plans if, say, Easton doesn't sign. And it might even be a plan as you get closer to the draft and you decide, okay, is it worth spending a first round pick on a guy that maybe is a tackle, maybe is a guard, and now we got to wait for him to develop? So I really get the feeling like the Vikings, if it's not Nick Easton, probably will be patient in what they do, and I don't expect any signing out there to say, oh, that for sure is going to be a guy that's a starter anymore. So it's kind of where they're at in free agency, where they're at in the salary cap, and exactly the type of guy that they're looking for, because that has changed over the years from, looking for a mauler like Alex Boone, and then all of a sudden the offense shifts, and you've got Pat Shermer running the offense, and now Stefanski running it, and they're looking for the more athletic guys out there. And according to Spielman, there just weren't a lot of guys in free agency that really fit that bill, especially at the price that they were looking for them.
What are they going to do for a kicker?
That to me is really the most important question right now, because I do, with everything that's been pretty well picked over on the offensive line, kicker to me is their most glaring need. And, Dan Bailey's still out there. Steven Gostkowski's still out there. Sebastian Janikowski's out there. I found it interesting, though, that Marwan Malouf, their new special teams coordinator, he didn't seem to really shy away from, maybe looking at the draft for a kicker as well. But I would tend to think that they go after a veteran guy, but there's 3 or 4 of them that were free agents that have signed already, and I would say there's 3 or 4 that are left. So there are competent veterans out there, including Bailey or Gostkowski or a couple other guys. So I would imagine that as things develop here over the next couple of weeks, and maybe the price tag drops on a couple of those guys, they look to sign one of them.
We talked about Anthony Harris coming back and probably being the starting safety. How about Rashad Hill? Is he a potential starter, or are they just bringing him back for depth?
I think it's purely a depth play. He was a restricted free agent, so they could get him for $2 million. The other teams will have a chance to offer him a contract, but I'm not sure he's going to find anything that's too much more than that. Vikings would have the chance to come back and match any offer, but they wouldn't get any compensation if they lose him. I really just see that as a depth guy who can be a backup tackle for them.
Let's talk about Trey Waynes. I do want to say that this show has become one of the most popular on the network. Tons of listens, tons of social media impressions when we put the show out, and you can advertise with us and reach a very large and loyal audience, or the network as a whole. I think we've had months as high as 185,000 listens across the network. You can reach us at talknorthpodcast@gmail.com, and I'm sure we would love to work with you. Trey Waynes, do you think he's going to get traded?
I think the Vikings are fielding calls. I think there's interest around the league. Mike Zimmer has always used the line about you can't have enough good cornerbacks. And, we do see that play out throughout the years. Mike Hughes goes down. Holton Hill needs to step in for a while. Xavier Rhodes dealt with a bunch of injuries last year that he played through most of them. So there is some substance to what Zimmer says there. But with their cap situation, if they can find a decent trade for Trey Waynes at some point, and I think they're gonna be very patient here and see what comes out of the market. I mean, if it could even be after the draft where a team thinks that maybe they can find a starting cornerback in the draft, and a couple of those guys go before that team is able to pick them. Now all of a sudden they might come back to the Vikings with a better offer. Ultimately, I think Zimmer wants to hang on to Waynes, but they also have to look at it long term. Waynes is on the 5th-year option of his contract, and it's going to be extremely difficult for them to re-sign him to a multi-year contract. I mean, that's going to cost them at least $9 million.